Welcome to Quid Pros Quo, where creativity meets academia. Here, we're all about leveraging our love of academia to improve both your creative writing practice and ours. Whether you're honing your craft or just beginning your writing journey, we're here to share scholarly insights, inspiration, and advice that benefits us all. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to Quid Pros Quo. I'm Zach.
And I'm Lynn.
And today, to round out our planetary science course, we are doing our case study for an indie book, Rise by Brian Guthrie.
So we are super excited to have Brian here. But before we introduce him, let's talk about what we've been doing. We are wrapping up our Planetary Science for World Building course, which Zach has done a great job heading up. And at the beginning of each episode, we want you to share your response to the homework from the previous episode. So if you have homework that you've completed and you want to show to us, we would love you to send that to quidprosquo@gmail.com, and we would love to read it at the top of the show. Next course, so starting on the next episode, we'll be doing a fairy tale course, which will be fairy tale retellings, and they'll be feminist and queer, and there'll be all sorts of fun. So you should definitely tune in for that.
Well, without any further ado, Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself. We're so happy to have you here today.
Glad to be here. My name's Brian. I have written Rise along with its sequel, Fall, along with my wife, Michelle, who's somewhere else right now, busy. Been writing since I was 14 years old when I've discovered that people would actually talk to me if I wrote about them. Although mostly they were just interested in if I killed them that week. Military veteran, recovering, Christian. And, currently live in New Mexico.
Awesome. We're happy to have you here because we're based in Utah, so we're glad for the internet to make this kind of thing happen.
Yes.
All right. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say that I have really enjoyed reading your book. There's something about the story within a story and doing multiple of them that just I really enjoy. It reminds me a lot of Hyperion, which is another book that I really enjoy. So I was quite pleased going through Rise and seeing something similar going on with each of your narrators within the story. I was really intrigued by how you played with planetary science inside of this book. You basically took a planet and you blew it up, and you had all of the story take place on these different pieces orbiting around the broken core of the planet, and they kind of function like separate continents. But you also chose to have these shells be non-spherical. I imagine just like if you were to take a glass ornament from a Christmas tree and break it into a whole bunch of different pieces, that you would get those sorts of... That's
a very good description.
I'm glad
I was just seeing a broken ornament. I was like, oh yeah, actually that does work perfectly.
And I was a little tickled when there was the little threat about being thrown or falling off of the edge of the world. That was also very delightful. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to choose this setting, and some of the things that you thought about as you were constructing it.
Oh, that's a funny story, and it all started with an erotica writer.
Oh!
So, this story started off as high fantasy, and I wrote it all in its entirety, and it's sitting over there, and it's like a 3-ring binder that's like that thick, double-sided paper, pile of poo. I keep it over there to remind me not to go back. And about a decade after I wrote that, I was taking part in a writer's group in Augusta, Georgia. It was led by a romance author. There was an erotica author, a mid-grade writer, one other one, I think she was fantasy, and then me, the only sci-fi writer there. Oh, there was a mystery writer too. And after starting off, letting them read the first portion of what was going to be the rewrite, the erotica writer looked at me and said, "This isn't my cup of tea, but the world doesn't feel like it's a character in your story." And her example was, look at the Lord of the Rings. Look how the farther they went, the worse the land got, the more evil it got, the more like it was a part of Sauron's plan to stop Frodo and Sam. And I thought, actually, that's a very good description. So I went home and I was thinking about what was coming with the story and where it was going. And I just thought, let's just rip it all apart. And so I literally ripped the world apart and then thought, okay, now I got to figure out how to make this make sense scientifically.
That's so fun.
Would you?
Makes me think of.
You go ahead,
sorry?
but I have a follow-up question after you're done.
Okay. I was just going to say it reminds me of one of my favorite like writing metaphors is you have to like break characters like geodes to make them sparkle or like glow sticks to make them shine. And like thinking of the world as a character, I love that you like literally broke it apart. Zach, what was your follow-up question?
My follow-up question is if you could tell us a little bit more about how you got to be in a group with so many different authors. Was it like an MFA program, or kind of tell us a little bit about how you got into that situation?
I think the romance author, she was a New York Times bestselling author. I think she was bored, and I found out about it through the library. So it's like, okay,
Nice.
well, so I went and started reading it. And interestingly, when I went back after I ripped it apart and had the story start over again, that writer, the erotica writer, she's like, it was a suggestion. I didn't mean for you to take it literally. Like, yeah, but it worked. Now the world is this whole alien thing that literally is like you're at risk the whole time. Like, yeah, you definitely have added that. Like, everyone who's afraid of heights is now terrified of your world.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Because that's just such an eccentric writers group. Like I've been in writers groups with mostly like fantasy writers because that's what I write. But like that's a wide range of writers. So that's so cool that you had that experience.
Plug for your local library too.
Plug for your local library. We love libraries here on Quid Pros Quo.
Yeah, I think that was the Appleby Library in Augusta, Georgia, an old one. Like they took over a plantation to turn it into a library.
Wow.
So
that's so cool.
Yep. Now I'm sure you actually want to know how I came up with the way the world works.
Yes.
Yeah, that was going to be the next question.
Well, I liked your analogy of the broken ornament, but how I usually describe it to people is that when they went and destroyed their world, they peeled off the tectonic plates like they were peeling an orange, and then just left those in orbit because they needed to break it apart to create what they were creating on the inside, which was basically to take the core of their world and turn it into some kind of never-ending power source.
Yeah.
Because they needed that in order to do what they really wanted to do, which was recreate the world in the way they wanted it. But not just the world, the people also. Like they wanted to recreate everything because their world was being ripped apart by a disease that could reprogram matter. And so they were trying to figure out how to stop that, and this was their desperate attempt, and it didn't go right.
Which is like the best way to start a story, like everything's going wrong. Let's plop a bunch of characters in the middle of it and see how it goes.
So tell us a little bit about how, as you were approaching this, you thought about how is the day-night cycle going to be impacted, for example?
Well, none of their light comes from above. It all comes from below. Like all of their light comes from their core. All their light, heat, and energy comes from down there. The water is above them. It's trapped against another shield. So there's a shield surrounding their core and a shield surrounding everything else. So it's like they're trapped between two shields that go all the way around. And the more force that's exerted against them, the stronger they get. So you literally cannot break them. Like it just makes it stronger. So
like a Newtonian fluid almost.
Almost, yeah.
I think that's what they're called.
Non-Newtonian, but yes.
Yes, that's the word.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not the physicist here.
Neither am I. I consulted physicists and astrophysicists and astronomers to help me figure out how to make this work. So like the singularity that's inside their core, it's actually 4 singularities that are feeding off of each other and so that's where all the energy, the endless amounts of energy comes from. But in order to contain that, you needed to have an impenetrable shield. So the singularities generate the shield, push all the pressure on it, and because it's all contained, it just keeps generating power and more power, which they use. And then there's the other shield at the top, because I don't know if you know this, but space is cold. And it's not friendly if you don't have, like an atmosphere to protect you from it. And when you rip up literally the entire mass of your planet, you lose all of that atmosphere. Gravity's gone, everything, the magnetic core is gone. You're just completely exposed to space. So they put another shield around it and stuck all of their water up against it to protect them from the cold. All of the water that's closest to the shield is all frozen solid. And then to provide oxygen, they altered the way their oceans work so that so that algae and stuff could live in there, but without having ground to grow out of.
Mhm.
So they actually don't
I love
all know what's up in that water.
Yeah,
They're
that's
not even
so fun.
They're not even sure if they have a moon anymore. They know that there's something outside because as it goes around, it compresses the water up towards the shield. It doesn't bend the shield, but it compresses the water.
uh-huh.
So they can actually see it moving.
That's really
Oh, that's so
fun
cool.
because like having the water, water takes a lot of energy to heat up, and it tends to hold on to heat really, really well. Hence why living next to an ocean is rather nice because
Warm.
everything is just pretty baseline.
Very warm and very humid.
Yes. That's really cool. It also reminded me of some of the like the biblical story about the firmament being placed in the heavens in order to divide the waters, where you have water up above and you have water underneath, and you have the earth jammed into the center. So I thought that was an interesting connection as well.
I don't remember specifically thinking about that way at the time, but it is entirely possible that was in the subconscious because, as I said, I'm a recovering Christian. I was raised around that. So
earlier you mentioned you talked to a lot of physicists to like consult them and like figure it out. Zach is my resident physicist who I consult for all my sci-fi stuff. But I wondered, even though this wasn't a question that I like had you prep for, but how do you like find people outside the writing sphere to network with and ask questions about? Like, how did you find your physicists to consult?
One of them was actually a high school friend of my wife who he and I don't get along. We actually are not. We don't have any interaction on Facebook because every time it happens, it's just bad. But we maintain the connection because he likes answering my questions when it comes to the science of the world. And I would just go places and talk to them. So I was at Dragon Con for like 8 years in a row, and they always have astronomers and astrophysicists there, and they're always willing to answer questions. So back in 2013, but 2014 and 2015, I was there and I was asking them because I wanted to make sure it was consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole how the singularities work, that was actually from that friend of my wife's from high school, and so the effects of like a gravitational body on an impenetrable shield with water pressed against it, that was tip from an astronomer.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
So, but I wanted, since I was creating such an alien world with there's some basics to the science and the magic system that's there, the way their science works, the way their technology works. There's some leaps of faith that have to happen, the suspension of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't, once I established where the suspension of disbelief was needed, outside of that, I wanted everything else to match.
For sure.
Just because you can build a flying ship doesn't mean physics doesn't still apply, right? Which, as you saw in Act 2, on the origin story of one of the characters, that became a very important part of their world when they figured out, oh crap, we don't actually understand how the physics of our own world works.
It reminds me of an adage that one of my professors said. He only said it once, so it wasn't like a repeated thing, but he said that in science fiction, you get one lie and one miracle, and then everything else you got to keep it consistent.
Has to make sense. Yeah, exactly. Well, and every time I wrote a scene, the first thing I would do when I went back was I would read it and go, "Is there any of this? Hand waving, the magic? Is there anything?" It just one of my most hated phrases that I ever hear. I hate the word seemingly. And I hate the words as if by magic, and I really hate them when they're together. There's a reason I don't read fantasy anymore, because like it looks like magic. Well, what does magic look like? Well, we don't know. So, well, you have to figure it out. You have to describe it. So focus on the effects, right?
For sure.
And then try to be consistent inside that system.
Yeah. I've often heard when I was doing my like minor in creative writing in university that you can start with like that miracle or that coincidence. You cannot end with a miracle or coincidence, because then that's Deus Ex Machina and it does not work.
Looking right at you, Brandon Sanderson.
Oh,
I've got his giant tome up next to listen to, and I'm putting it off just because it's so long. Plus, I'm going to have to go find somebody's recap. Like, what do I need to remember? Because it's been a couple of years.
I
But
know. I just finished book 3 a couple months ago, or maybe a year ago at this point, and I haven't read book 4, and now I had to read book 4 and 5, and it seems like too much.
Those are long. Those are really long.
They're so long.
the most recent
the
one is a
audiobooks are like
60-hour read.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot
They're
of reading.
too long. And Zach, I think, is not even reading them till the whole series out, so you gotta wait like 20 more years.
I don't
Which
know.
series, though? Are you going to wait until Stormlight Archives is done? Or are you talking about the entire Cosmere?
Oh, I'm more thinking about specifically the Stormlight Archive. I've read of a couple of other things of.
I prefer the Mistborn. His
Mistborn is
Mistborn
really
work.
good.
I really liked that system there that he created.
You were talking a second ago about like not understanding the characters, not understanding the physics of their own world.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to the physics, you have resources in this world, but the destruction of the world strains resources from the inhabitants. So they rely on a global computer network to manage their resources. And a lot of the stories within the book the stories within the book are all about like what happens when that network gets strained, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was reading through this, it reminded me of something that Tracy and Curtis Hickman wrote when they were talking about not relying on magic inside of their book Extreme Dungeon Mastery, where they were thinking about a setting where you have floating islands. If it's floating, it means it's less dense than the material around it, and since it's less dense, it can't hold on to water. And that scenario came to mind as I was reading about the struggles with managing water and how the lack of water was something that drove Michaela to start getting involved inside of the story. It also, to me, kind of felt a bit like a critique about our modern reliance on technology to get the things that we want or need.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Well, and also the whole commentary on like we have this technology and most of us don't even understand how it really works.
Yes.
We just expect it to work.
Right. I think about that a lot, how like if we got sent back in time, like would we actually be able to recreate modern medicine or Wi-Fi or smartphones or anything? And most of us, the answer is no. And even if we can do one thing, like if you know how to build a smartphone, you probably don't know how to make Wi-Fi work.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, if you go back in time, why would you need a smartphone? That's
true. If you're the only one with a smartphone, it becomes just a brick. It doesn't do much except maybe play like a couple hours of Fruit Ninja, I guess. So you already said that you like agree with, I guess, it comes across as a critique, and it is a critique. But like, was the conflict meant as a critique, or was it like a consequence of the setting? Like, did you set out
both?
Okay, talk to us about that.
So I just refer to them as the Ancients. When the Ancients built their society, I mean, the whole thing was built on this technology that was both magic and science. Because, like, I might take a moment just to explain how the magic works. It's based on coding in the elemental table. Basically, they discovered that there is a coding language at the base level of reality that allows them to manipulate matter, which is an extremely complex thing. So they built machines to help them do it. But some of them can also do it, as you saw in the story. Some of them can do it without the aid of machines. In the past, those two that society was split by an ideological difference in should you be able to use the power without machines, or should we just let machines do it? And that conflict is what drove them into war, because of I mentioned before the disease that was rewriting their genetics. One side blamed the other side said, no, it's not, you just don't understand how this works, and so this ended up in this giant conflict. And the very technology that they used to keep their world idyllic, so like initially the citadels, the water network, all that stuff was designed to control the temperature of the planet and keep it paradise. Like they were intentionally trying to keep the planet as clean and natural and as paradisical as possible. And when the two characters that came up with the idea to build the device that ripped the world apart, they just used the same technology. Like, as you'll see in book 3, when it explained, they used the network of piping that was controlling everything, that was connecting all the citadels together, internet, all of their water, everything was being controlled that way, along with the temperature controls and the climate controls. They just took that network apart. It's like burst it in the middle, and then just used the citadels and all the piping connected to them to keep the shells together, the fragments of the planet together as they lifted it up. So it was kind of like, yes, we have this technology, but we became so reliant on it that when it got turned on us, we didn't know what to do, and then we became completely dependent upon it again. And then fast forward a couple thousand years, and most people don't even remember what happened.
Right.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
it goes back and forth. Consequence versus is it a commentary? It kind of goes back and forth.
And there are lots of layers to the commentary too, because as you were explaining it sounds like there's a lot in common, not only with just technology in general, but specifically about how we're starting to ask questions about the role of artificial intelligence and what we want our algorithms to do versus what we want humans to do.
So interestingly enough, this world still hasn't figured out AI.
Yeah.
Which, like, when people ask us, so is it AI? It's like, no one ever figured out AI, because what was the point?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then what's going on with that thing inside? It's like, I guess you'll just have to stick around and find out.
Nice.
We didn't find out all that good stuff.
By the end of book 3, everybody will know what is inside the network.
Ooh.
By the end of book 2, you'll know that it's not just one thing in the network.
Nice.
We gotta keep reading then.
Mm-hmm.
For
sure.
sure.
You also chose to include dragons in your setting, which was super exciting to see, because you don't see a lot of dragons in science fiction. Like, it's always like dragons in the past in medieval fantasy, and never dragons in the future in science fiction settings. So can we ask why you've chosen to add a creature that we're used to seeing in those medieval fantasy settings versus the futuristic ones?
Well, like I said, initially this started off as a fantasy story. And I liked the idea of the magic system so much that I decided, when I decided to jump forward into the future, to figure out a way to convert it into something that can be used. The dragons came right along with that. So remember, I said everything that I do, I try to make sure that as long as there's a certain amount of what you said, miracle moments, like you get one, like that. But everything else has to make sense. So when the world was getting ripped apart, everything was changing. Gravity was changing. All the physics they didn't change, but they were all new. People didn't understand them. And in trying to function the way they were, nothing was working. And somebody figured out that they could alter their body to resist the forces. And I won't say who that somebody is, but it's not necessarily a good person. And no, as to actually where the rest of them came from, no one really knows anymore. But essentially, they showed up because their form could resist the gravitational forces that was ripping the planet apart. They even had to alter their form once they started. So, there's a creature in book 2 that is hinted at in at the end of Act 1 in book 1, and with the prison scene, when what's happening. When the power goes out. And then we revisited at the end of Act 2 from Quentin's perspective, but we never actually see what it is that's outside. Well, in book 2, you see it. But the form that it's in that one is not even its original form. It has changed its form multiple times. There's actually a horror short story that's going to be released as an appendix to Shatter that actually explains the very beginning of where that creature came from. But even in Shatter, as it appears, you'll see it alter its form because of how the world changed. Because some of them have wings, but they're purely vestigial. They don't need them to fly in their world. They actually don't. Remember, I had described in how they have this huge coral structure going down there from all the way up here. A lot of dragons have that horn structure that kind of looks like a crown. Well, theirs just fuses back all the way and goes all the way down their spine, all the way to the tip of their tail. Well, that coral structure makes them immune to gravity and generates their own gravity. So when you're in a world that's being ripped apart by gravitational forces pulling it and everything, you kind of need to be able to resist it. So they got the tough form from the armored form of the dragon, but also altered way. And when stuff is flying through the air, it's kind of hard to fly on wings. So they just retracted them in and turned them into something else.
Nice. That's so cool. I love a good evolution story as a biologist.
But and they don't break the. People have asked this. They do not break the laws of thermodynamics because in order to increase their structure size, they borrow matter from around them. And so when they decrease, it happens once in the second book, but I kind of barely hinted at it. But in the third book, you'll see it more. When they shrink, you see steam come off of them.
Mm.
Because they're turning that matter back into a gaseous state to get it away from them.
Mm.
So, do you think you're going to continue playing with planetary science in your future work?
Oh yeah, because after this one is done, because in the third book we go back and we get to see it all happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like we get to see what happened to their entire star system, because it wasn't just their planet that got destroyed; their entire star system got destroyed. And then it became this thing that's hanging in space. And there is another series that I'm planning on working on that takes place around it, but they will never know what's inside. Mm-hmm. Like I said, that shield's impenetrable. But the idea was, what if another civilization stumbled along this big giant shield in space, around something that resists gravity and actually has its own gravity and pulls things in around it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't know what it is, and they're all trying to figure it out. And it's like the only thing they can agree on with this massive civilization that builds up around them. And this is the only thing they don't fight about. It's like, because nobody knows what it is.
Mm.
It's like the one thing they can agree on. Everything else they disagree on. They have their own fights and all kinds of petty differences and everything. But the one thing they can all agree on is we don't know what this is, and we all need to figure it out.
Mm. It sounds very reminiscent of kind of how Cixin Liu wrapped up the... I don't actually know what the name of the series is, but the Three Body Problem series, where as you get further to the end, you get more of that high technology. We don't understand it, and we don't know even how to understand it, but we got to do something about it, or we're all going to die.
That I just watched that this past year. Obviously, it just came out. That scene when the what were they called? The Phobos, when I think is what they called it, when it first revealed itself around Earth.
Yes.
That scene was so good. And I was sitting there watching it, and my wife leaned over and says, "You're seeing this, and you're thinking about how your world could appear. Our world could appear on screen." I was like, I am. Like, look what they're doing. If they can do this, like, clearly, science fiction is not as expensive to produce anymore. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed Three Body Problem because it made you think.
Yes, for sure.
Well, I think we're coming up on time. So, Brian, where can our readers find you?
Everywhere.
Everywhere? What's your handle? Give us your handle. Give us your website.
My handle on just about everything is Guthron. So take the first 5 letters of my last name and change the IE to ON. Guthron. So .com is the website. I'm Guthron on Twitter. I'm Guthron. Oh, not Twitter. I got rid of X because somebody stole my account. So I'm like, you know what? I'm done with you guys. But I'm Guthron on Insta, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, everything. Pretty much if you go anywhere and look up Guthron, you'll find me.
Our homework for our listeners is to go check out Brian's stuff. Rise and Fall, I'm guessing, are available pretty much everywhere.
Yep, you can get them anywhere.
Awesome.
They're also Audible. You can get them up for your Kindle or your Nook or whatever, or the apps. Be surprised how many people go, but I don't have a Kindle. It's like, you're standing there holding a smartphone. It's like, what? It's like, there's a Kindle app. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I get this a lot when I sell in malls. At conventions, I don't run into as much, but when I'm at the malls, there's the number of people who don't realize that Kindle app is, and there's a Kindle Cloud Reader. It's like, you don't need a Kindle to read Kindle books.
Wild. I never would have guessed. But then again, I've also been a loyal Kindle reader since I was like 13 or 14. So
yeah,
I
remember
rarely use the app because I actually do have a Kindle.
I still have an original Kindle sitting over there. It's completely dead. But
yeah, mine too.
Because I could just put it on my phone and read.
Perfect. Well, awesome. I don't have anything else to wrap us up. Do either of you have anything?
No, it's been a pleasure, Brian. We're super happy that you came and chat with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Listeners, thank you so much. See you next time.
Quid Pros Quo is hosted by DC Winters and CK Jensen. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today.